So you could say this is a follow-up video to a video that I made on September 14th, 2021 called Takemichi Will Save Shinichiro, Tokyo Revengers Ending Theory, Chapter 221 plus spoilers. I'm tempted to call this video the exact same thing because it seems like the theory might be right, and I wanted to essentially give an updated version of the theory. And talking about the latest few chapters, because on chapter 269 we just recently, it started a Shinichiro backstory kind of mini arc, flashback stuff. And now we're on chapter 273, which seems to have just concluded that. And a lot of people have been mainly focusing on how time travel works, and I was actually going to make a video myself on that, but then I soon realized the rules were nonsense. It changed every single chapter. At first it's like, you have to kill someone to become a time traveler. Then it's like, no, you have to kill yourself to become a time traveler. And now in this, it's not either of those. It's just you can be the time traveler if you want to be. So we're not talking about that. What I want to go through this chapter because there's a lot of important parts to this chapter. And I want to talk about how I still think the ending of the series will still revolve around Takemichi going back into the past to save Shinichiro. And there is more proof here. And it lines up almost perfectly with what I said about a year ago. Which is funny because with the way that the series started to head immediately after I posted that video, it seemed like that was just it was done, right? The theory was over, and I'm like, well, damn, that was a fun theory, but oh well. But no, now it seems like we've just taken a detour, and now we're going with the theory head on. Like, that is going to be the ending. So let's get up onto speed with why I'm thinking this. So why Takemichi will go back into the past to save Shinichiro, and that will solve the series. Let's go. We start chapter 273 with Takemichi. What are the names? We start chapter 273 with Mikey talking with Shinichiro after Shinichiro just went back into the future after changing the past so Mikey never died. And this is right when Mikey had broken his moped garbage bike. And Shinichiro just starts bawling his eyes out in happiness, and he's just so happy that he actually fixed things. He saved his brother. And then Sanzu shows up and he's like, yo, am I going crazy? I'm seeing shit. I'm seeing multiple timelines. There's what's going on. I might be reading too much into this, but it does seem like that each time traveler pair changes the rules a little bit. Because with Takemichi and Naoto, they went Takemichi went 12 years into the past, and Naoto, I don't know if he even had an awareness of the other timelines. He must have, but I don't think it's ever explicitly said. I could be wrong. And then we have Mikey and Takemichi, which Takemichi goes back 10 years, I believe, into the past, not 12. And Mikey doesn't seem to know about the other timeline, but he definitely knows that Takemichi returned. He kind of just had this awareness. And now we have Shinichiro and Sanzu, which he directly, straight up, just has timeline awareness of the other world. It's interesting. I don't know. And now with Takemichi and Mikey, maybe their bond is so strong that's how Takemichi is able to see into the future. It feels as though the time travel evolves over time, almost. So after Shinichiro and Sanzu discuss about the other timelines and whatever, Shinichiro just decides to take a stroll, and he stumbles upon the hero moment, Takemichi saving Hina while Kisaki watches in the background, which we saw originally back in chapter 89. And the way the events happen in that chapter is Hina tries to stop these three bullies with Kisaki, although he's a little nerd bitch, because they're bullying a cat. And so she's like, hey, stop doing that. That's not the way. No. Well, then out of nowhere, Takemichi just drop kicks one of the kids, and we cut to black where he absolutely gets destroyed. And he's just on the ground crying. He calls Hina weak, then walks away. But we see a little bit more of that scene. The same kind of introduction happens. We actually see, we cut to after Takemichi drop kicks the kid, and you can see he's slowly getting back up. And then he goes through the whole spiel. We see them beat him up, and then Shinichiro actually shows up and he intimidates them and gets them to run away. Takemichi's like, man, I just want to be a hero like you. And he's like, don't worry, man. You can. You can be a hero. Just take this power. He grabs Takemichi's hand, and we see the spark of lightning happen. And then kaboom, Takemichi is now a time traveler. And he says, hey, little boy, if there's somebody that you really want to protect, when all else fails, you can use this power. He goes, yeah, I should have just asked him to give it to me. See you around, kid. So I don't know what the rules of time travel are. Maybe it seems to be if the time traveler is willing to pass on the power, it can be passed on, because he gets a flashback, Shinichiro, back when he killed the homeless man who had the time travel powers before him. He was like, oh, I'll give it to you. I'll give you the powers. And instead, Shinichiro just kills him. So it seems like you just have to be willing to give it. But in order to time travel, to go back into the past, if you don't have a link, you have to die, I guess. But if you have a link, then you can go back and forth freely. I don't know. That just seems to be the rule. It's very arbitrary. Is that the right word? It doesn't make too much sense. I'm sure we'll get a very proper explanation about it at some point. And then we cut back to the present, and Takemichi's like, oh, that fateful day, Kisaki, Hina, Shinichiro, and I, we're all connected. That's when the story started. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I hate, this is a very chosen one story now, and I'm not about it. But it doesn't matter, because that's not the important part. The important part of this chapter is the very first page. Let's just go through it word by word. Little Mikey goes, listen, Shinichiro, Baji went all out for this bike and I just went ahead and smashed it up. Can you help fix it? Shinichiro goes, how old are you? That doesn't matter. That top part. So now let's jump to way back to chapter 43. And so I believe it's Baji. He's walking around with Mikey's bike because of reasons I forget. I don't care. It's not important. And this gang is like trying to like beat the bike up, and because they hate it, they're stealing his lunch money. But Baji like takes the hit for it and whatever, and they're starting to beat up Baji now. But then out of nowhere, Mikey shows up, just trashes the bike, and he's like, hey, keep your filthy hands off my best bud, all right? He completely destroyed his bike and took out everybody and saved the day. And so a little bit after the scene where the bike gets trashed, on August 13th, that's when Kazutora and Baji go and break into a bike shop, just a random guy's bike shop, and steals a CB25OT. And that's the fateful day, or night, I guess, that Shinichiro dies. And that's when a lot of us thought that Kazutora was actually a time traveler, but that's not how it works. And he already gave up his powers at this point. And so now, what does this have to do with anything? Basically, we've been given this theme of like people saving Mikey, and that's somehow what created the darkness within him. I don't know how. Maybe I'm just not paying attention, but the darkness is kind of created because Shinichiro manipulates time to save Mikey, and now Takemichi's going back in time and doing all this to save Mikey, and it seems like Mikey just wants whatever to happen, right? Just let it be. So how do you save Mikey without saving Mikey? Well, you save Shinichiro, Mikey's brother, the thing that basically kept the darkness away, even though it's what created the darkness at the same time. But at the same, Shinichiro kind of kept the darkness at bay. So what point in time can Takemichi go back in the past to save Shinichiro? Well, the hero scene. Basically, this scene lines up almost exactly how I predicted. In the previous video, I'm like, okay, but what if this hero scene took place around the same time as Shinichiro's death? And we know that it does now. It takes place right before. So we could think of this one of two ways. Takemichi, right before the hero scene happens, he has his cape on, ready to go in action, but then he goes back in time at that moment. And now he has to ditch that, which means Hina doesn't get saved by Takemichi, and probably she will end up with Kisaki, just because of reasons. But she would probably end up surviving at the end of the day, but those two would most likely end up together. I forget why. I explained why in the other video, I think. I'm not going back to rewatch that. But most likely they would end up together just because they were pretty good friends until Takemichi showed up, and it stated that that's the day that she fell in love with him. And so without that happening, she doesn't fall in love with him and she'll probably end up with Kisaki. And Kisaki doesn't go evil, which means a whole bunch of other stuff that I go into in the other video. And so then from here, Takemichi would go find Baji and Kazutora, stop them from doing that, and then save the day. Or if you think, okay, maybe those events are too far apart, Takemichi could still be the hero and everything would happen just as it normally would. We could alternatively say that Takemichi wouldn't go back to stop Kazutora and Baji. Instead, he would stop from getting the bike smashed up in the first place, which means that he would maybe save Baji to begin with. Instead of Mikey showing up, it would be Takemichi showing up to save Baji instead. Or just that entire scene to stop that bike, Mikey's bike, from getting destroyed so they don't have to go and get him another bike, which stops Shinichiro from dying. There are a couple ways you can think of that, but at the end of the day, that scene would not happen when they go back in time. And plus, there's... regardless of, I hate the idea of Kisaki and Hina being together, but at the same time, I just love it. I love the idea because it's a bittersweet ending. Takemichi saved everyone, everybody's alive, but he doesn't get the girl. He deserves her, but he doesn't get her. But I just think that's kind of fitting. It's nice. But there's a reason why they showed these few scenes. There's a reason why he went back exactly to the day that Mikey destroyed his bike, which is the same day that Takemichi becomes the hero. Right? There's a reason why these are the moments that were shown in this chapter. They could have done any other scene, but it had to be this one. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why they connected these two scenes together, because if you take a look at the scenes and kind of dissect them a bit, there's Takemichi's hero scene, but you could also say that this is Mikey's hero scene. I mean, they both drop kick someone or something in order to save someone that they care about. And it's stated by Baji, it's like, since that time, Mikey was an invincible badass. It's almost like this is his hero moment. They're taking these two somewhat unrelated but thematically the same moments, and they are directly connecting them together. They chose to put these two items in the timeline right next to each other, right next to Shinichiro's death. They chose to connect these scenes on purpose. And so there has to be a reason for that. And so if you want to know about how this changes the timeline, I do talk about that in the other video. Although, of course, what Sanzu girl Sanzu isn't in that video because she didn't exist yet. But, you can talk about her in the comments of that video to see how the timeline changes with her in the picture now, which I couldn't even begin to explain in this video, even if I wanted to, because I don't know any of her backstory because I forget. But to sum things up, they essentially connected Shinichiro's death with Takemichi's hero moment. And Takemichi has to not be the hero in order to save Shinichiro, which means that everything else in the timeline will automatically be corrected. Again, I go into that more detail about the timeline changes in the previous video, and it saves Mikey without saving Mikey. Both Shinichiro and Takemichi would have an understanding. They'd be like, oh shit, I gave you time travel, and now, alright, that's neat. They would understand each other, which would be very neat. Again, I talked about I talked about it in the previous video. If Takemichi and Shinichiro talked to each other, if they were both time travelers, it just seemed like a cool idea. And now again, I'm talking about the same thing here. But one thing that I think would be interesting is, how would Takemichi go back in the past this time? Yes, there was Mikey who would be his link, but would he be using the link power? Would he be in the situation that they're in right now? Is Takemichi really going to go up and shake Mikey's hand? Absolutely not. What is the one other way that is shown 2 times, for I guess 3 times technically, that a time traveler can go back into the past? It is suicide. It is death. It is murder, whatever. The time traveler dies and they go back into the past until they pass on the power, and then they can eventually die for good. So most likely, I'm going to predict, I guess, Takemichi dies in this fight. He goes back in the past to exactly when he wants, because that's how it works, I guess. And he'll go back to that moment. See, were connected. Me too, a long time ago, and Hina and Kisaki, we met Shinichiro. That was the beginning of my story. That memory's already in his head, and he realizes he's connected the dots himself. That moment is what started this story. It started Mikey's darkness. Everything, he can fix it with that one moment. And so I'm thinking Takemichi's gonna die, go back in the past. For whatever reason, you could say because he goes a little bit before this hero moment and stops the bike from getting trashed to begin with, or he goes and just saves Shinichiro straight up, which he'd run away from the hero moment and not do it. I'm very convinced that's going to happen. He will not be a hero in this timeline. I'm very adamant about that. But then he goes and saves Shinichiro. They have like a mutual understanding. Maybe the power gets passed off to somebody else. I don't know. I wonder who. Maybe Mikey. I don't. I'm not gonna do that. God, I'm very sick, by the way. So I apologize for my voice. But and then the timeline's gonna be fixed. Again, watch the other video to figure out how the timeline exactly gets fixed because of these reasons. Because everything kind of just perfectly aligns. Everything kind of just fits together as though this is like the perfect timeline. I mean, except for Shinichiro. Shinichiro it's an NTR ending. It's sad, but I mean, hey, everybody's saved. So that's my take from Tokyo Revengers chapter 273. I'm excited because, to be honest, I've been a little disappointed with the manga kind of ever since that video I made, just because it went into a direction that I felt was unnecessary. And even this backstory, like, 7 chapter backstory, they should have just made it a whole ass spin-off prequel manga, right? They should have just done that. But they kind of threw that out the window. But if they were to actually do this, it wouldn't take very long. They could totally just do this. Have Takemichi die, fix the timeline, save Shinichiro, and everything's great. But then I don't even know what his future would look like. But I just think that would be a very fascinating ending. It'd be a very fitting one. Everybody's saved, but at what cost, right? In every other timeline, someone else paid for Takemichi's meddling with time for one reason or another, right? There's always been someone suffering, which is why he keeps going over and over again. But now in this final timeline, he'd be the one suffering, but he did it. He saved everybody. It's all good. At the end of the day, everything's done. However, I guess in this timeline, there would technically be 2 time travelers, wouldn't there? If Takemichi never becomes the time traveler, he's still a time traveler, maybe. Actually, if he goes back in time, I wonder if he would still have his time traveling abilities. Maybe they'd be stuck with Shinichiro, actually. But maybe Shinichiro could go back in the past, manipulate stuff to give Takemichi his own happy ending, while keeping the rest of everything all good and well. But then again, that could have a whole spin-off sequel series with Shinichiro messing up the timeline and stuff just to give Takemichi a happy ending because he feels like he deserves it for saving his life and saving his brother and saving everybody. I don't know, there's a lot of possibilities with this ending now that I think about it because, yeah, Takemichi, when he goes back in the past here, he wouldn't be the time traveler because Shinichiro wouldn't have given him the abilities at that point yet. Shinichiro would still be the time traveler. But they would both understand, oh, hey, time travel. Interesting. So yeah, Takemichi would be stuck in the past. Shit. I'm very excited about that future. Somebody, if that doesn't happen, someone make a fan manga of that, alright? Let's go Attack on Titan, Requiem, whatever. Let's do this. Anyway, though, I hope you enjoyed this video. I did. I think this is a really neat theory. I'm not to toot my own horn or anything. I think that would be a really cool ending. Especially with the way that it was built up. I like it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more content, if you could even call it that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.